what does it look like to build relationships, meaningful, lasting relationships that will produce trust and ultimately political power to do the morally correct thing, which is to get healthcare for all. Transformational politics has got to be done with folks who share our values, and to approach them in a way that's going to make this effective. You spoke last week about the need to connect our common morality and translate that into truth, and to use evidence in support of that truth, and then translate that into action, political action. So maybe you could speak a little bit about the process. I think you called it like pedagogy or methodology of how do we build these relationships, and maybe just start with the first question of why do we need to build these relationships? Why is it so important to your work and the work of others?
Thank you so much, Chuck. I appreciate that question. Just as we get started, I think when we think about faith communities, we often think about people of faith isolated in distinct buildings around the country. Well, we think about them as places where people go on Friday, Saturday, Sunday to participate in worship services, to pray, to learn more about their faith. But we don't get to what the heart of most of these faith communities really are. Most of these faith communities are the byproducts of organizations, or dare I say movements, that began for human liberation and human development. I see skeptical faces here. What is the Jewish faith if not a movement for liberation and freedom? God comes in the beginning of the book of Exodus to a group of people who've been locked away in enslavement. God liberates them from the oppressive hand of Pharaoh. God gives them the promise of a land where everyone will have their own land, and everyone will be able to grow their own food, and everyone will be able to participate in their own ability to relate to their own God and their own governance. This is, I mean, if we think about it, and how does the whole story of the Hebrew people begin? It begins with a march from bondage in Egypt to freedom eventually in the land of Canaan/Palestine. The fundamental thing I want us to get is that the Hebrew faith starts off as a movement for liberation, a movement for social justice in the midst of the world. And those of you who are Christians, if you look at the New Testament, you'll realize that Jesus is a Jewish man in the midst of a Greco-Roman world who comes from a marginalized society, a city of Nazareth. What good can come from Nazareth? He, early on in his ministry, organizes small towns and small communities in the Galilee. He sends people out 2 by 2 to these different towns to get them ready for his coming. He says that I've come to bring the kingdom of God, i.e. Having an alternative governmental system than the system of Pharaoh that is so oppressive that governs, Pharaoh, Caesar, that is oppressive and governs the land. He, in essence, develops what he calls what is a movement. He marches around the small towns in Galilee, and then he makes his march down to Jerusalem and confronts the authorities that are there with this larger gospel. The kingdom of God is at hand, i.e. a time when God rules is at hand. And all along the process, what has he been doing? Well, he's been providing free healthcare for people. We read that as he was healing sick people along the way. He was taking care of people's mental health. We call that casting demons out of people. He was feeding people who were hungry. He was making sure that those who were marginalized and had been left out of society were welcomed in, like we might do with immigrants today. In essence, Jesus's movement was a movement for social justice at its core, a movement for the uplift of humanity. So the first thing I'd say is that when we talk about trying to move towards a healthcare justice paradigm, moving towards a single payer system, moving towards something that will provide more just access to healthcare to all of God's children made in God's image, we are speaking the language of the synagogue, of the church, of the mosques, of the temples of our world. We are speaking a language that is familiar and resonates. We need to make sure that as we talk about our message, we can frame it in ways that are comprehensible to these faith communities, ways that they will recognize, this is similar work to what Moses was doing, what Elijah was doing, what Jeremiah was doing, what Jesus was doing. We need to help everyone to see that there is a deep and enduring connection between the work that God came to bring. I love the way Walter Brueggemann talks about it. He talks about the role of a prophet. And I'd say that we have a prophetic responsibility in part as people in this movement, is to provide God's alternative vision, i.e. what should be in this world, and juxtapose that to what is in the current reality. The is unjust. The is self-perpetuating. The is wants you to believe that this is all there can be. We can't have another system. We're stuck with the system that we have, and to change the system would imperil our ability to have a democracy. No, the alternative vision that is presented by all of these faith communities is a better world in which no one is denied access to healthcare that they need to survive, where we're focused on maintaining people's health going forward, where we can make sure that no one is left out of the larger system. If we can begin to find the resonances with faith communities and our message, if we can begin to speak to them and find ways to bring them into this larger movement, we are exponentially expanding our vision. We are tying into a significant moral core. We are really making sure that we amplify our message with communities that not only need to hear it, but that would resonate with this larger message. I hope that helps answer some of your question, Chuck.